Okay, folks, well, welcome back to another instructional video. This time, we are going to be discussing how we make our coat block. So if you haven't watched the waistcoat draft video yet, you're going to have to go back and do that. And the reason I say that is because we use the waistcoat block to make the coat block, which is why you can see the different colors on here. We're going to convert the panels from our waistcoat draft into our coat draft, essentially. So this video should be much quicker than the waistcoat video because the majority of the draft has been done for us already. That being said, some of this may or may not be a little confusing to follow. I hope it is not. It's pretty straightforward and simple. This video will not include instructions on how to do the sleeve. That will be its own video. There's two reasons for that. One, it's a full draft, so it would probably make this video a little too long if we incorporated it. But the other reason is we use measurements from the armhole in order to draft a sleeve. And although this armhole is generally pretty successful on most people I put it on, it's entirely possible that when you do a first fitting, you may need to make an alteration to the armhole itself. And if you go ahead and draft the sleeve based off of these measurements and then you alter the armhole, you're gonna have to go back and start again. 18th century sleeves are not as forgiving as modern sleeves because they are basically the same size as the armhole itself, which is pretty different on a modern suit where the armhole can be much larger than the actual sleeve. I'm sorry, the armhole can be much smaller than the actual sleeve. The sleeve will kind of get like shrunk into the armhole on a modern garment. So a little bit different order of operations, I'd say here. We really want to make sure our armhole fits as intended before we do the sleeve draft. So we'll make that a separate video. Now, normally we start these videos off with a little chat about measurements. Well, we don't need to do that because we're not going to be using any measurements we didn't use in the waistcoat draft. We're simply just going to be moving points around to make our final result. So we're going to go ahead and dive right into it. As has become our custom here, we're already starting off with some of the points plotted out to speed things along here. So what you can see here basically is our waistcoat panels. Now I'm drafting them next to one another, and you could do this, but it's not essential this go around. Not like it was before, right? Because we're not actually drafting. So you could do these individually on paper, and that wouldn't be a problem at all. So we're going to start on the back panel here. And so what are some of the things we want to do? Well, we want to alter the shoulder angle, which we're going to do. And we really want to push the upper bit of this side seam out. And there's a reason for that. One, when we change our shoulder angle up here, the garment is not going to be as likely to hug the shoulder, which is actually a good thing. And it would also kind of avoid some seam stacking, which is a good thing. And we're going to need a little bit more distance all around to get a coat over a waistcoat, let's say. So we just need a little bit more girth kind of everywhere to make that a thing. You know, a waistcoat will increase the size of somebody's body, in some cases significantly, depending on the material you're working with. In the waistcoat video, we did discuss how I don't like on a waistcoat when this portion of the body sort of sits off from the body. And you'll see that if you start paying attention. You walk around, you'll see there's like a little pocket of fabric that just sits off of the back of the wearer, and I don't like that in a waistcoat because I don't think it's very clean. However, on a coat, that's exactly what we do want, right? We want to create a pocket back here, so when we set the sleeve into it, and a person reaches forward, there's somewhere for that fabric to go before it starts tugging on the back panel and really putting stress into this portion of the garment. That in conjunction with the sleeve shape itself, you'll notice the sleeve will kind of pocket in this area also. So you could probably pay attention to that on some wearers. And that again kind of does the same kind of does the same thing. As the person reaches forward, there's somewhere for the fabric to go before it tugs on this whole panel and puts pressure on this seam over here. So how do we achieve that? Well, if you remember in our waistcoat draft, the back shoulder here was drafted at a 45-degree angle, right? This point to this point was the length of the shoulder measure, but drafted at 45 degrees. So this is the first thing that we're going to change. We're going to do the same measure, and I'm going to make all the changes in red so they stand out to you here. Same shoulder measure, so let's say 7 inches or whatever it is we're using as an example. But we're going to draft that line out at 35 degrees now rather than 45 degrees. And when we do that, we're going to have a significant change in the angle, but that's also going to change where the shoulder ends. If you see that, it's out further now, at least seemingly further. So the seam itself is not longer, but where it comes out in the draft is further out, okay? Now, just like we did on the waistcoat panel, we want to go ahead and square straight down from that point, and we should find this point here, okay? And then, depending on the wearer and their body, just like in the waistcoat, we're going to push that point forward 1/4 of an inch or 1/2 of an inch. And it's just kind of a judgment call. If you're not sure what to do, start with 1/2 of an inch, and if it just ends up being a little untidy under here when you put it together, just back it off a bit. But then go ahead and you know, connect those 2 points, just like we did in the waistcoat. Now we want to find the midpoint on this line, which we're going to eyeball as right there. And we want to back that off like we did on the waistcoat, 1/2 of an inch, okay? And this will create our hollowness so that we can draft the new curvature to our armhole. So we'll go ahead and throw that in, and it will look something like this, right? So that's our new armhole. Now, unlike the waistcoat, it's going to be essential on our finished pattern that we mark this center point. So go back and measure your curve and find the exact center of that point, and make sure we mark that, because that's going to become our rear pitch point whenever we draft and set our sleeves. So the rear pitch point is going to be very important. So make sure that's in the middle of the armhole and make a permanent marking there that will remain in your finished pattern. I actually notch my patterns at the pitch points so that you never lose them. Just a little cut taken out of the fabric. So that's going to be our rear pitch point. It's going to be in the middle of that armhole. Now, because we've moved this so far forward, we're going to have to redraft it into our side. No change to the side down here. So we're just going to take our new point up here at the bottom of the side and take it down into our waistline as cleanly as we can. And that should give us a pretty dramatic curve, like so. So if you ever look at an 18th century coat, they usually have pretty dramatic curvatures on the back side seam. Now this block tends to be, let's say, in line with something more like a 1750s to 1760s coat block. And I chose that for a reason, because it's pretty neutral really in a lot of ways. As you start getting into the 70s and the 80s, this point starts moving back and this curve becomes really pronounced, which is pretty cool. Okay, now the bottom, the last thing we do, this is that, our vent line on the back panel here becomes our pocket line on the front. We're going to drop that 1 inch. So that means that, through here and through the curve, we're just going to continue that curve out like so, okay? And that's it. We drop that 1 inch, and we do the same thing over here at our reduction. We're going to drop that 1 inch. And that's the back panel sorted out, okay? Pretty simple. So let's turn our attention to the front. Now, if you remember in the waistcoat video, I told you that you were likely to have to make alterations to the armhole, but I don't change the system because it's a building block. And with the changes that are made to the front panel, the armhole tends to work. It doesn't tend to need any alteration in the coat draft. And if it does need some, it's very minor. So this is the reason that I leave it alone. So what alterations are we going to make here? Well, we'll start easiest and we'll work our way to hardest. So we'll start at the bottom. Just like the front panel, we're gonna drop the bottom 1 inch. Okay, so we'll drop this point down 1 inch. Now on the front, in addition to dropping it 1 inch, we add 3/4 of an inch all the way to the front. And now this is going to give us the extra amount we need for it to be a coat and close over the waistcoat. 3/4 of an inch is it. That's 1.5 inches all the way around the body. That tends to be enough for most people. You know, when you go ahead and you do your mock-up with this, you can, you know, play with that. But for most people, that tends to be true. So we're just going to redraft the front edge exactly as it is from the chest line down with 3/4 of an inch added. Now at the neckline, this is going to change a little bit. So let's not continue this up just yet. So our neckline and shoulder point, we are going to move. Now, if you remember in the waistcoat video, I did say that this is rather square, or in tailoring world, we would call this straight. And what straight means is it'll hang rather straight. And what we want to do is crooken this. And crookening in the tailoring world means that the front hangs sort of to an angle. If you've ever looked at imagery of an 18th century coat, you may notice that from the shoulder point, kind of going down towards the armhole, there's a crease often that you see in portraiture and in well-made reproductions, right? The reason that's there is because of the angle of how the shoulder is set. So we need to move our shoulder back in order to create that. That also aids, and if you ever notice that the coats sort of sweep open, right, when they're worn. Some of that comes from the side seam here, and some of that is from where the shoulder sits. You know, if you see a coat like a later coat, 1780s, 90s, where they almost look like they have a pigeon chest and they're really open. I mean, the fronts are drafted with some more curvature, but the shoulder points have really moved back, and that back seam, right, is really tucked in, which pulls the front panel back this direction. So the seaming has a lot more to do with that than what the actual front shape is. So again, this is like a 1760s, 1750s, very neutral. You know, you can play with this even further. So what we're going to do here is we're going to take our original shoulder point, and you'll notice I have another line up here, and it matches the one in the back. Well, if you remember, the one in the back was 1 inch above the top square line. So this is going to be the same thing. It's 1 inch above the top square line. So we're going to move our shoulder point up 1 inch and back 1 inch. And that becomes our new shoulder point right here. So it's going to go up 1 inch and back 1 inch. Now, if you remember, we had this line down here that was 1.5 inches below the sort of top square line. We're not going to alter that at all. That's going to stay exactly where it is. And we're going to connect the dots to that line in the same way that we did with the front panel. We're going to take the same measurement, right, which I think verbally we said was 7 inches as our shoulder example. And wherever that 7 inches happens to hit this line, that's going to be the new shoulder, okay? So we take it down just like so. So you can see how we've added some length, just like we did to the back, but we've moved the shoulder point back, okay? Which now means we have to change the neckline. But because we raised this, it's a good practice to raise that neck point as well. So we're going to make sure that this is above, this is up 1 inch also. In line with the 3/4 of an inch we added to the front also. So it's sort of like up 1 inch and like over 3/4 of an inch, if that makes any sense. And then this way we can finish our front panel, our front edge. We can finish the front edge. And then we can draw in our new neckline as well, which should be dramatically different from what we had before. So it'll look something like this, right? So there's our new neckline. So the last piece of this now is to correct the armhole, because we've kind of moved it back a bit, right? So we just have to curve it into the existing armhole wherever it will hit, which would be something like this, okay? Now what does this do, moving all of this shoulder around? Well, in addition to adding some extra length to it, just like we did to the back, which will help you get over the extra girth of wearing a garment underneath it, um, and the hang thing, which I told you about. Now we've crookened the jacket, right? So you should get that crease that comes down along here. It's a draping crease, right? When you put the coat on, the coat should want to swing open, and the whole jacket is anchored from this point, okay? This is where the whole thing hangs from. So you should see that it swings, and then you get this crease through here, which is correct. But also by moving this back, right in this region, when it's worn, you're going to create a pocket out of cloth, and that's because this point hasn't moved, right? So as we increase this and we increase this, and they get sewn together, and the two pieces come together, this point hasn't moved, so it will like that, and this will create a pocket here, which gives you some more comfort and makes the armhole work better than it does on the waistcoat draft, where we wanted everything to sit against the body pretty well, where in this one we do not. Now, the last thing we need to figure out is our front pitch point, which you can see I have marked here. So when you put a sleeve into a jacket, the back seam should be set at the back pitch point, and your front seam should be at the front pitch point. This is extremely important that the pitch point be correct, because if it isn't, you are likely to feel some pinchiness up here. So then you may think that, well, my armhole's too tight. I need to open my armhole. And then you open your armhole, and now you have to alter your sleeves or redraft them because you've made a change to the armhole, like we talked about. And then you find that didn't fix your problem. It's still uncomfortable in here. One of the main issues for that is that the front pitch point is not in its correct location. It's not the only issue, it's one of the issues. One of the other issues could be that you actually need to drop the front shoulder open even more to increase the size of that pocket that naturally forms. And there's some other things, so we don't need to waste time with that in the video. But anyway, the front pitch point is absolutely essential that we get this correct. So how do we find it? So we are going to measure the whole armhole, beginning at the back pitch point, moving forward and going all the way around. Okay, and we're gonna find out, how big my armhole is, and let's say it's 24 inches all the way around. So how I do this actually is I just make a tick every inch, boop, 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 all the way around. I'll make ticks every inch, all the way around. So let's say it's 24 inches. So we know 12 inches then is half of that, right? So the front pitch point is going to be half of the armhole, measured from here over the front, not the other way around. From here over the front. So we will count to 12, and when we get to 12, we're going to mark that, okay? And that will also become extremely important, not just for the making, but when we get into the sleeve drafting video. It's important because these 2 points are anchors for some of the measurements we take of an armhole to draft the sleeves. I will say that when we put the sleeves in, just so that we have a little bit of context of what's going to happen here with this draft, when we put the sleeves in, the undersleeve should be pretty much identical to this half of the arm side measurement. So in our case, 12 inches, right? And we set it in from the rear pitch point across the bottom to the front pitch point, and we do that cleanly. Now, the top sleeve is likely to be slightly larger, perhaps as much as an inch larger, which is okay. You could trim it down to fit absolutely perfectly, or you could do what I prefer to do, which is ease it in up here at the front by the front pitch point, and up here at the back by the back pitch point, and that just creates a little bit of extra movement space there to help avoid that pinchiness and give us a little bit more reach in the back before we start tugging on this seam. But 18th century sleeves are very different from modern sleeves in the sense that they are generally basically the same size as the armhole, And if there is any additional ease, it's very little. It's even kind of hard to find on original sometimes, because a little bit of ease, like an inch of ease across the whole armhole, I mean, when it presses out, you really would never even know it's there, unless you did some really tricky measuring. So there you go. But those 2 pitch points are going to be extremely important. But that's it, folks. That's how we convert the waistcoat draft into the coat draft, minus the sleeve. We'll talk about the sleeve later. Now, some of you may do some time periods, like later, 1780s into 1790s, that kind of thing, where you really want that pigeon chest, let's say, right? So you may want to know, how do we achieve that pigeon chest? Well, this is the basic way I figured out how to do this. I move this shoulder point all the way back to the front of this armhole. So I will square a line from the armhole, the front of that armhole, back down like so, right? And then this becomes my new shoulder point. And then what I'll do is I'll actually cut out this coat shape, okay? And I will sort of move it so my shoulder point hits that. And again, this line more or less stay, well, you just move it, right? And then you'll just trace everything. And it will make a dramatic difference to the whole upper body here, and then the whole front gets curved into it. And it'll make that sort of wild pigeon chest shape. Matter of fact, if you want, I could probably just cut out one of these things real quick, and I'll show you what I mean by it. It's pretty interesting to see it work. So let me just cut one of these out real fast, and you can see it. So we don't need the whole body. How much this armhole we're going to need either, but I don't think it's all of it. So we'll just cut out and say that. We'll make that our demonstrator. So you can see this is our coat thing here, right? So I will just take this and quite literally move the point up to here, like so. And if we trace that out now, you can see the dramatic difference. And then again, you just sort of curve it all back in to where things need to be. But that makes that's how you can get on and make that sort of wild pigeon chest shape, which is pretty cool. So when you sew these two pieces together, this thing really wants to swing. It's pretty neat. So all kinds of things you can do with the block system here. Like I said, it's just a building block, something for you to use to make whatever it is you desire in the end. Okay, so now we've complicated this a whole bunch up here, so it's kind of not great to look at. But anyway, so let's talk about a few closing items here. Again, no seam allowance on this, just like the waistcoat. So you're going to have to go add whatever seam allowance or inlay it is that you prefer. This time, do consider the fact you'll need seam allowance on the armhole, because you are more than likely setting a sleeve into this, right? And don't forget that the front edge, again, even though you added to the front edge, to make a new seam allowance less front edge. So you'll need to add whatever overlay you want to the front here. That distance from the edge to where your button line or your buttonhole line is. So this is where either your buttons will sit or your buttonholes will begin. And seam allowance in all the other usual places. And I just want to point out again, since we dropped this an inch down here, this is your new pocket line and your new vent line. Just like before, if you give this a go, I'd like to see what you do with it. If you have any issues with it, as usual, you can reach out to me. Again, if you're a member of the menswear page, I'm more likely to get back to you there than I am on YouTube. Yeah, I don't pay as much attention to. So if I see your comment, I of course will get back to you. It's just not as likely I will see it on YouTube as I will on the menswear page. But I hope you all enjoyed that and you have some fun with it. And I look forward to seeing anything you guys make with this stuff. Until next time, take care.